Hello my friends, operator Starsky here. It's day 751 of the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine, and just a while ago we received a report from Odessa. Russian terrorists conducted another missile strike targeting residential areas of this city, and unfortunately we have information on 14 killed Ukrainian civilians. Also 40 Ukrainian civilians received different injuries. Among the victims, there were unfortunately first responders, rescuers who died on the scene due to the strike. Also tonight, one of the biggest oil-producing plants in Russia, located in Kaluga, was hit with drones. According to the Military Intelligence Service of Ukraine, this factory provided the Russian invaders with fuel, and tonight it joined the list of numerous Russian factories that were obliterated by the drone strikes in the past 3 days. Parliaments of 20 countries refused to recognize the Russian elections that will take place on the occupied territories of Ukraine. They recognize those territories as being illegally occupied by the Russian invaders. Among the countries, there's countries of G7, which was known as G8 before Putin invaded Ukraine, and the Baltic countries as well. Also today I'm joined by Jonathan Fink from the Silicon Carton. It's a big pleasure to see you offline finally. Today we have some really interesting event taking place here in Berlin. Can you tell us a couple of words about this panel?
Absolutely. So we've got 5 hours of panel discussions. We're about, I'd say, halfway through at this point. I'm already thinking about evening meal. It's got to that point in the day, but we've got some great stuff coming up. So at the moment, there's a panel going on, really examining German policy, why Taurus isn't being sent, some very troubling developments in terms of Russian foreign policy and how they want to potentially freeze the conflict, which of course plays into Russia's hands. We had a panel this morning where I spoke with my co-host about how Russian propaganda, nuclear threats, etc., are used to coerce and control the West, are used to prevent the West taking action to push back against Russian aggression. And we kicked off the day with a fantastic Canadian commentator who's talking about German policy, how the domestic political issues are shaping Germany's response to the Ukraine war, and how there is increasing divergence between the language coming out of France, for instance, out of the Élysée Palace, and Chancellor Scholz, who seems to be a bit out of line with the German people. There seems to be far more support for Ukraine and for Ukrainian victory than is perhaps represented by Germany's government. And that is an unusual but historically significant divergence between the majority views of the people and what is actually being reflected by politicians. We don't have that same issue in the UK. There's general consensus in the UK that Ukraine is in the right and that we shouldn't fear Ukrainian victory. And I think that's going to be an interesting topic later about why certain countries are extremely affected by, on the one hand, Russian direct propaganda, but also the more subtle coercive type of propaganda that makes you fear Russia, that makes you not send F-16s, Taurus, seize Russian central bank assets, that kind of stuff, controlling our behavior, and why Britain seems to be slightly less constrained by that type of thinking. I don't have a clear answer to that, to be honest, but it's going to be worth speculating.
Absolutely. And speaking of France, in your opinion, what is the chance to see the NATO troops in Ukraine?
I think the chances are low if they're going under a NATO flag, a NATO uniform, etc. We're hearing rather very interesting words coming out of France. And what we're going to discuss in our panel in a minute is I think there's a big difference between words and actions. And we need to understand what Putin's mentality is. Words for him are not something to be taken seriously. There's no value in words. For him, they're a sign of weakness. So I'm not sure it matters too much about whether we hear defeatist language coming from the German Chancellery, or whether we hear, extremely strong, robust, militaristic language coming from France. that makes literally no difference unless it's reflected in action. And at the moment, that means hardware, lethal metal that's finding its way to Ukraine. Until that happens, I don't think Putin's going to pay attention to anyone's words.
Dear friends, I will leave the link to this panel in the description below, so you will be able to see this video offline, but I'm sure that you will find a lot of interesting information there coming from different speakers. And of course, please subscribe to the Silicon Curtain, because it's very important and right thing to do. With that, my friends, I wish you all a beautiful day. We'll see you next time.